Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Yesterday, Minister of Education, Dr. Tariq Shawqi, held a press conference where he explained how the rest of the academic year is going to proceed. And President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi said that the parents now have the choice to either allow their children to go to school physically after schools resume following the mid-year vacation, or to continue their learning through e-learning or e-education. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi also met with Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli and Minister of Education and Technical Education, Dr. Tariq Shawqi. And actually what happened is that the presidential spokesman said that the meeting dealt with presenting plans and procedures for holding the mid-year examinations and resuming the current school year 2020 and 2021. In order to know more, we're very much delighted to have with us here in the studio Dr. Sanaa Sabet, Education Development Mentor. Good morning to you, Dr. Sanaa.
Good morning, Ella. Hi.
Now, to start with, COVID-19 changed everything. Atop of the changes was the educational method, and we shifted from the traditional education to the e-education or e-learning. And perhaps that shift, because it was sudden, it was very difficult for the parents, for the students, for the teachers, for the administration of schools. It was difficult for everyone. And then step by step, we started adapting to the new situation. And perhaps the parents are the most suffering from it. But we would like to talk about the educational process in light of COVID-19 and how it's changed totally.
Obviously, the actual pandemic itself came as a shock to the whole world. It was unknown. People didn't know what was happening, and they didn't know how to react.
Yes.
In most cases, it was prudent to have lockdowns. I think what happened here in Egypt was a much better way of approaching it. They did have people working from home. They did have students stay at home, and they didn't have a full shutdown like other places, which in that case helped a little bit with people's mental health and the economy. However, regarding the schools, it was very, very difficult because all of a sudden, you can't just stop educating people. In the beginning, last year, in the beginning of the epidemic, it was at least, we'd done 3/4 of the way. It was by March that the epidemic started.
And by that time, we had already completed a long period of the school, of the academic year.
Absolutely. So that was an advantage. The disadvantage, of course, was how do we do it? Everybody panicked, and rightly so, because
especially we were approaching the final exams.
Absolutely, and not only that, but how do you complete the curriculum? How do you continue? What do you do with these kids who are at home? So obviously, the best way to do it was to do the e-learning part of it.
Okay.
The unfortunate part is that, of course, schools were not prepared. Nobody on earth would have thought that this was going to happen all of a sudden.
Yes.
I have to say, and I really have to commend schools all over the world, and here in Egypt in particular, because they did do a lot of work to try and adapt themselves. There are a lot of teachers who have no idea about how to use a computer, yet they manage to do it, and it's a lot of hard work. Preparing a lesson online is unlike what people think is not something you do in 5 minutes. It actually sometimes takes up to 4 days. It's a very long process because you have a child that you don't see, and you have to motivate this child to come and take the lesson with you. So in the beginning, it was very, very hard, but eventually we managed to at least get through that year. Obviously, as time went by, teachers got used to the IT systems and the programs that were available, so it became easier. The unfortunate part was that the students did not adapt to the system.
I was just going to ask you about the advantages and the disadvantages of e-learning, if we take it from a complete perspective, from the parents' perspective, from the students' perspective, from the teachers' perspective, from the school administration even perspective.
From the school administration perspective, it's obviously it's a lot of hassle because you have to make sure that there is an internet connection available for all the teachers in order to be able to give the lessons. The curriculum is cut down because obviously the timing. We used to say to the students, don't spend so much time in front of your computer. Now it's changed. Now we're saying, please sit down in front of your computer.
Because they were sitting in front of their computers playing, Dr. Sanaa,
right.
or wasting time or spending so much time on social media and chatting. I mean that students know how to use gadgets very well. Kids, even at the age of 2 or 3, they know very well how to use computers, iPads, laptops, whatever gadgets that come their way. And perhaps the problem is that the parents themselves or the teachers are not as skillful as the children.
Yeah.
But how to do it in a productive way, how to do it in a proper way, that's the point.
Well, the idea is that education, which we have to, by the way, separate from learning, because education is teaching a child according to a set curriculum in order to gauge the progress of any system.
Okay.
Learning is a lifelong thing, and that can happen on a daily basis. Simply learning about how to wash your hands, or about the coronavirus, about the history of Egypt, or about anything that you want, languages. That is a lifelong process that you do in order to benefit yourself. The curriculum is standards. And basically what we need to do is to be able to think, okay, now who is responsible for the education of the children? Unlike many places, we tend to say the schools should be responsible. It's not. The education of our children is split 3 ways. 1/3 the school, 1/3 the student, and 1/3 the parents. This pandemic has shown us that really, in order for us to allow for our students to gain the best benefit, or the most benefit, out of their education, the parents have got to set the systems. Now, I have to state here that I do feel so sorry for the parents, because they themselves have had to stay home and do the work. So,
and now they have to choose whether to allow their children to go to school or to stay at home.
Absolutely, absolutely. So they're taking responsibility for something that God knows, should I or should I not? What happens if my kids get sick? Although they say that children or students don't usually catch coronavirus, but of course there are the teachers. And that is something that it's a dilemma.
Yes,
it's a dilemma.
It is.
But I think basically, anyway, when we go back, it's a hybrid system, whereby the students go a couple of days, then we have the online, and then a couple of days, and we have the online. I would think that sending the students to school is very important, because they need to connect with their peers physically.
Yes.
Online is not, doesn't help the learning process, the social interaction. I think parents really need to sit down and reevaluate their life at home. They need to find out how they can actually manage. You know, with the online at home, also the disadvantage, and one of the main disadvantage, of course, is the internet. And the fact that if you have 2 or 3 children at home and they're in different levels of education, how, do you buy 3 laptops? Who gets the priority of using the laptop? So I would think that in such circumstances, probably sending the kids to school would be much easier for them. However, the role of the parent at home should be one of going back to basics, setting the systems, making the students understand that the students learning online is just as important as going to school. It's not like, oh yes, I've seen this here, I've seen this in Pakistan, I've seen this everywhere. It's the same thing. The students go home, they're at home, they're relaxed. The connotation between home and school, it's totally different. Home is for resting and playing, and school is for education. So the students feel
it's a psychological state.
Absolutely. The students
And
believe they're home.
psychologically, they feel at home. So
Absolutely.
they are not ready to, receive information, learning, education, knowledge, whatever. They feel relaxed. They feel, unlike the psychological feeling of the classroom or physically being
Absolutely.
in school, where they have to be very attentive, listening to the teacher, their eyes on the board to see what the teacher is writing. Because this is one of the complaints of the parents. They say our children are so relaxed. Sometimes they just log in to the class and they disappear.
Yeah,
They
the
disappear.
cameras go off. I've had so many teachers telling me this, and the fact is, unfortunately, yes, it's true. I mean, the child will go to bed at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, and they will, oh, can't be bothered to wake up at this time, or they wake up and they say good morning and they haven't even washed their face, and they're probably still wearing, they put on a sweatshirt or something on top of their pajamas, and they can't be bothered to get dressed. There has to be a system. You know, you have to wake up same time as the school times, you have to get dressed, and you have to sit in front of your computer. And that's how the child will start to take things seriously. If the parent makes sure that the child does this, and that's very important. Usually what's happening is the parents themselves are still confused because they themselves have to be at work,
Yes.
i.e. at home, at work. So who uses this computer? Who uses the internet connection? How much is that going to cost? So that at the moment is a great disadvantage to the online learning.
How can we boost creativity and innovation and appetite for learning, as you said, because this is an ongoing thing? And before we went on air, we were just discussing this, how it is the role of the teacher and of course the parents to boost creativity. And now it's online. How can we do that?
It's still the same. It's still the role of the teacher and the parent. There are an awful lot of programs that help students develop their creativity. And I'm not talking about things where you go out and you buy things that are expensive. The idea here is to recycle and teach your kids how to use things at home in order to make things better. I think we have to go back to basics. We have to understand, because what is happening is the parents need to teach the students that they are human beings, they are responsible. And it's not like, it's not an entitlement. They're not entitled to have everything given to them on a silver tray. Life is not so easy. I think it's time that parents started talking to their children, actually talking to their children, obviously depending on age, and getting them to find out what they enjoy doing. As I say, there are so many programs, there are so many things. Perhaps they can get the students or the kids to help them in the house. They can learn a language together. They can draw something that is creative. There are language programs that are available that they can actually learn music. There are programs that teach you how to play the guitar, the piano. So the thing is, it needs time to sit down and investigate it. And it's not like, okay, you go and find out something to do. No, it's something that has to be shared. It's a family thing. Regarding the education, I understand that President Sisi has tasked the education ministers to actually advance the system of education, because you can't have an archaic system from the 20th century working in the 21st century. It doesn't work. You have to get the kids to be able to think critically, to be able to use their minds and to communicate, because that's where the world is going.
Yes.
We're waiting for the amazing reset that's going to take place after this pandemic happens, where we all go back, but we all go back in a better place. And leaving your children to their own resources, they're not going to do this. It's TikTok or it's Facebook or whatever social media they use, and it's not going to develop them creatively.
Okay.
And the parents really have a huge role to play. Even though they say they're busy and they have been busy, now it's time for us, in a way, a pandemic could be a godsend to us, because it's allowing us to be together. And allowing us to be together is giving us another chance. It's given the government a chance to do good things for the education system, and it's given the parents a chance to re-look at their family circumstances and fix their system. Basics, we have to go back to basics. We have a house and thankfully a computer and internet. Let's start going to behavioral things. Let's teach our kids behavior. You know, in school, when the kids are young, we teach them that when they get out, off their chairs, they have to put their chairs under the table. They have to knock and they have to say please and thank you. And believe it or not, this is something that is missing. So many times I'd go through the door or I'd let somebody go through the door and they never even bother to say thank you. And that's basic.
That's the role of the family.
That is the role
Definitely
of the family.
They learn that at a very early, very early stage. Even when the mom starts feeding her baby, he needs, once he starts speaking, to say thank you. It's basics, as you said.
It is basics, but it doesn't exist anymore. You know, it's one thing to give your child freedom, but they've got to earn that freedom. There's always the communication part. You've got to learn that you communicate with certain people. There's a difference between you communicating with your friends and you communicating with your elders. And there is, I mean, I'm not saying go back to being old-fashioned, although sometimes being old-fashioned is not bad. We didn't do too badly in those days. But certainly there is a lot of possibility. The social media and the technology. And I think eventually and very soon the types of jobs that are available are actually going to change due to the changes in the
whole world.
In the whole world,
yes. Distraction is one of the main problems that the parents and the teachers face with the students. How can we minimize distraction during online learning, especially that distraction was an issue even in classrooms for some students? But the physical classroom, this is the environment where the teacher controls distracted students by snapping questions, calling their names every now and then. But online, it's different because there is distraction, and whenever, as I said, whenever the teacher starts calling names, they're not there.
Yeah.
And then somehow they manage to pop up again after even before the class ends and say, we had a power outage or bad connection or whatever it happens. How can we solve all these problems?
It's obviously, first of all, it's got to be put into the student's mind that sitting in front of the computer and taking your lesson is just as important as being in school. The parents have got to follow up on that. The teachers have got to make their lessons not just interesting, but they've got to give the students the role in the lesson. Instead of a teacher instructing students on a topic, you can't just sit there and do a teacher-centered teaching, i.e. the teacher teaches all the time and talks all the time. You have to give the student the power in order to control that lesson and the interest in that lesson. So basically what the teacher needs to do is to almost like flip the classroom, i.e. tell the students what the topic is and then allow the student to find out and research that topic.
This is what happens abroad.
And it's going to happen here. This is something that is really going to happen, and it is in the process. You can't, I mean, here...
You can't spoon feed the students with information.
No.
But this is the system that has been going on for so many years. It's about time to change, I believe.
And that's what's happening right now. And that's why I really, really believe in my heart of hearts that the President Sisi knows that this is something, if we're going to be competitive, we've always, by the way, every Egyptian abroad has something very special, and they tend to be very successful when they go abroad. We want to do this here. We want to keep our kids here and to show them and to be proud of them and their successes. So basically, yes, I believe that you've got to train the teachers, and this is something that, again, I heard is happening. That was said in that meeting that was held on Sunday, they will be training teachers, whereas before they were not. The antiquated ways of doing it in a teaching college are now not suitable anymore for the new methodologies of teaching. We need to be able to compete with the same students, the same age, anywhere in the world. And I think we can do that. And we are in the process of doing it. It just takes time. Instead of just people complaining about the fact it's not happening, we need to buy into this as well. It's not a one-sided effect. You can't get things done unless people buy into it and start working with you in anything. In anything. It's easy to complain. I've seen parents on WhatsApp groups compare, oh, this teacher doesn't teach well, my kid is bored and they don't want to attend the class. Well, have you attended with your child to see what this teacher is doing?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or did you just listen to the child?
Exactly. You know, it's easy for them to say, oh, he's not, I don't want to, he's so boring. Okay. Maybe also schools and teachers should get feedback from students and parents as to what they feel would be interesting for the students. You know, doing a blind curriculum is not helping anybody. It's just merely giving information. What you need is to explain why. Now most of the educational systems are adapting ideas whereby there is a loose curriculum, or there is a curriculum but a standard as to the age level, and people will have to kind of adapt the current curriculum to what is actually happening in the real world. And this is the problem. We don't adapt our curriculum here in Egypt to what is happening in the real world. For example, if we do something in math, let's say geometry, I'm not a mathematical person, but what's wrong in saying, okay, a triangle, now let's see in this room, how can we figure, where's the triangle? And let the students work it out. And let the students actually say, okay, so if this is a triangle, how big is this part of the room? How do we measure this room? Get them to think using live examples.
What you're talking about, Dr. Sanaa, is called interactive.
Absolutely,
learning.
interactive learning.
And interactive learning, because I studied abroad as a child. I was in Saudi Arabia, and this is how I learned the language, because we did not learn the English language by studying the grammatical rules and the rules of the language and then applying them. Actually, we learned through the interactive way and then doing the other way around, learning through speaking and communicating, as you said. And perhaps this is the time for interaction. But now interaction is online, and it's even more difficult to interact online for all the reasons that we said.
Why? If I'm a teacher and I'm just saying exactly this lesson in class, I can do exactly the same thing. Okay, let's see, get up. Let's see, which room are you in? Okay, can you find a square in your room, for example? Can you find something, the things that are colored yellow? Can you find something that is soft? What is under your bed? So you've covered your math, your English, your art, whatever it is, and you're online and you're interacting with the student. It just needs a little bit more
creativity, perhaps. Creativity.
That's exactly right. Because you see, once you start doing this, do you think the student will be distracted? I don't think so. And that's the problem.
Especially if they are younger.
Of course. When they're younger, you have to be even more creative and more active. Of course, there's one very important thing that is very essential to learning, and that's getting a child to read. Okay. They say, the famous saying is, knowledge is power. Well, it is. And you can start from a very young age, and you can get the child to start reading phonetically. You can get the child. There are so many different programs around nowadays that allow the child to read. And learning through play can also be done online.
Yes, yes.
And it's not like, because before when the teachers were teaching, what happened was they would say, okay, here's a YouTube video and watch it. That's when they started. Now they don't. Now it's much more complicated. Now they do a presentation and then the presentation they put on their own voice and they start talking to the student. And of course, going live, the teacher will also interact with the student. And it, as I say, all of this planning goes backwards and forwards to the coordinators and the people who are in charge in order to make sure that it's done properly.
Definitely.
So we need, in order for us to succeed in a blend of online and face-to-face learning, we have to be the three of us working together.
Yes.
The school, the teacher,
and the children
and the parent.
Of course, of course. I'd like to thank you very much, Dr. Sanaa Sabet, Education Development Mentor. Thank you very much for being with us this morning in the breakfast show. And I hope that we pass this difficult situation to a better education method where we can all be adapted to the new global situation.
Well, we have to.
We have to. Thank you so much, Dr. Sanaa.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
And ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. A short break and we'll be right back.